This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
They said it was real. I'm taking it's real. I'm going in there. I don't care if they come to me and say, hey, this is how it's going to work. I'll just nod my head yes, and then I'll go and beat them up. So in my mind, I was like, there's no way this is happening. It can't happen.
Right.
And I remember watching the first match with Gerard Godot, who actually was a kickboxer in Japan, very good kickboxer in Japan. He was my competition, I thought. And it wouldn't have been much because I'd have just taken him to the ground. I mean, it's just, of course, we all know how that works when people don't understand what happens in a real fight. Obviously,
always goes to the ground.
The UFC brought that out. So, but when that happened and Gerard dropped the sumo and then kicked him in the face, that's when we all knew, like, okay,
yeah,
this is real. Right. And then I went in and won my first one. And then, of course, I went in and, it's when you have success, like I had, and I came from nothing, and all of a sudden I started seeing sports, and I was just climbing. And now I'm at the top of the world. I'm in Japan. I fought people from all over the world, and I am it. I'm the champ. Like, nobody can beat me. You get cocky. I mean, I don't care who you are. You just have that sense about you going, okay, I accomplished a lot, and I'm it. And then you go into something that you think is the same, but you don't know everybody, right? And then I see this skinny kid walking around in this gi, even in the press conference, and I was like, oh my gosh, who wears their wrestling trunks or their singlet or their boxing gloves into a press conference? Like, that's what he was doing. He was wearing this. I was like, oh, I'm gonna kill that kid. So I end up beating Pat, and then I go in and advice, and if I don't, I'm sitting there as he's choking me, going, you deserve this. You deserve this. That was probably one of the most, I think, what would you say, one of the biggest wake-up calls for me, because like I said, I had success through everything, and everything kind of not easy because I worked for everything and I always put work in, but it just seemed like everything was falling in place. Like everything was there and I was developing fast. And then all of a sudden I got, bam, knocked out. Like, what just happened? Like, I've never had this before. Like, boom. And that, I think that was probably, in my opinion, was a very important part in my life, because I really reevaluated everything, and it humbled me into a point to where, like, you're never that good. You always have to keep being better, because there's always somebody out there that knows something that you don't, and you need to be prepared for it.
Well, I want to reiterate on Grace. You were a lot of people's favorite to win that night, but the unexpected happened. Royce Gracie does the unthinkable and gives you your first loss. Though he wins the whole thing that night too. It's what put Gracie Jiu-Jitsu on the map in the U.S. What can you tell us about that night and what it did for the MMA in the U.S.?
It changed everything that we know about combat. I mean, before we'd always see these karate movies, and they always think that these guys are the baddest, or the boxers, or they're the baddest. And then, of course, wrestling was way down here. And, of course, we didn't know anything about submission really at this time, right? There wasn't really anything in there. It wasn't even known. So it was wrestling, and then it was striking. And everybody thought striking was it. Even though us as wrestlers, we laugh at, I don't want to be disrespectful, but if we ever came up to a karate guy, we would just laugh, like, because we knew as soon as they were on the ground, it would be like fish out of water, like it's over. So it wasn't like we didn't know that, but the rest of the world didn't know that. It just wasn't, it wasn't out there. Right?
Yes.
This changed all of that. It literally put wrestlers back on top again, because wrestlers, the ones, in my opinion, wrestling, MMA is the pro for wrestlers. That's where guys go when they're done having their wrestling careers. They go into MMA because they adjust. They know the hip. They know the balance. They know the leverage. They know the conditioning. And usually when they start learning to strike, they have heavy hands because they've been using their hips their whole life. And they're able to use those hips to create power. Even though they may not throw a punch right, they still know how to use their hips right.
right.
And so you see a lot of wrestlers are very good and have a lot of power when it comes to the striking part of it. So I truly believe that the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and Horian Gracie, Art Davies, Campbell McLaren, and I'm sure there's more, that all had the opportunity to change how we see combat sports. And it did change how we think about martial arts in the world that we live in.
Without a doubt.
On the heels of that early UFC, of the very first one, you're clearly one of the top guys in the promotion, to sort of use a wrestling term. What was your relationship like with the UFC and management at the time? And were you feeling the pressure that, hey, this is like a new promotion and they're trying to build it on my back a little bit?
I never thought about it. When I went in there and I got beat by Hoist, I literally dropped everything else. Pancreas, any thoughts of anything. I had so much focus on Hoist Gracie that nothing else in the world mattered to me. That's how focused I was. It was like, I have to revenge this. I cannot let this go. And I remember thinking to myself, well, and they even said, you're so much bigger than him. I was 5, maybe 8 pounds heavier than him. He was at least an inch taller than I am. His shoulders are wider than mine. So they always tried to make them seem like they were lighter.
He's not a small man.
Absolutely not. And so I came in at 190 pounds. And I know he had to be at least 180 or more just by looking at it. And and nobody ever weighed, right? So it wasn't like you knew. And so there was always a way, but I always knew that me and him were the 2 smallest guys in all of this thing. And so for me, it was really an experience to see how, and credit to the Gracies and to all those guys that started this, along with Campbell McLaren and Horian Gracie, Art Davies, to be able to expose how we think about mixed martial arts. Because when you think about that, everybody always thought these big guys were so terrifying. Well, now we know that's not the case. It's literally the guys that have conditioning, that have leverage and understanding of balance and knows how to do things right, as opposed to just being a big dude who just walks around and can throw a big hand. It doesn't work. And I think we've seen that throughout the years of what we've seen in the UFC.
You continued doing mixed martial arts until December 7th, 1996, with a victory at UFC Ultimate 1996 in Birmingham, Alabama. But in your book, you said you weren't happy with the money you were making. You took a break from fighting and contacted Barry Bloom. In short order, you found out Vince McMahon was interested. This is what you said. He flew me out so we could meet in person. We sat down and chatted for a while, and I liked what he had to say. I had been a little concerned about how he'd want to market me, but Vince thought I was most marketable just being myself. I would be the guy who fought in the street, in back alleys, in bar rooms, and in the rings and cages of mixed martial arts competition. How important was that part of the equation? How you'd be portrayed? Would you have come in if they wanted to do some type of character like a clown or a rich snob? Would you do it, Ken?
No.
I wouldn't.
That's why I had the meeting with Vince, was because I had other options out there. I had calls into Old Japan, New Japan, WCW, and I never heard back from WCW. So, I was definitely very, very cautious of how I wanted to be portrayed going into it, and not having an understanding of not using another character, obviously, but just how they would use that other character. But then when I came in, Vince wanted to keep me as me. And I remember thinking, okay, this will be interesting, being able to use everything I know in a wrestling ring. And of course, I had an understanding how wrestlers thought because I was one first. So I also understood that there was going to be some trust issues going into the locker room and getting inside the ropes, because I was a wrestler before and I had seen how it worked, and there's a lot of trust put in between each person stepping into that squared circle. So I knew that that was there. But as soon as me and Vince talked and we went over all the details and all the things they wanted to do, and then they put me on Monday, I think it was Monday Night Raw. I'm not sure if it was Monday Night Raw or not, but I was going to do something with the Nation. It was Farouk and being sitting in the front row. And so we did that, and it seemed to get some interest. And So then Vince says, hey, let's get you started. We'll get this contract done. I was happy with the contract and how it was built. It was really built on the strengths, and if I did well, I would do well, and I like that. And so I remember going into this thinking to myself, I had to get to a place to where I could focus on, because I couldn't do it in a shoot gym. It just wasn't the same, because I had all the gyms and everything I needed. I had guys to work with, but that was MMA. I needed pro wrestling and somebody that was better than me. Like, I needed education.
Somebody to learn from.
Yes. And somebody I could respect. Right. Yeah. And I remembered Bret Hart reached out and Vince said, and I think it was Vince, and don't quote me on this, but I think he said that I should go up to Calgary and work with Bret. Don't quote me on it. I'm not absolutely sure, but I know that somebody had said it to me. And I remember contacting Bret, and Bret should come on up. And I remember I went up there, and it was Stu's birthday. His I think it's his dad.
Yeah.
And he put me in so many submission holds, man. I was like, that was his birthday present. It's like, here, go ahead, take Shamrock and put him in all these holds. So for about an hour, I was getting submitted by his dad. So that was my first experience. But after that, I remember getting in there and working. And I remember him saying to me, you got to be you. Guys are going to try to get you in there. They're going to want you to go through these different pro wrestling things. They want, because they're comfortable with it, and this is what they know. So they're going to try to get you to do those things, and you got to stand strong and say, that's not what Vince wants me to do. I have to be me. And he said, do it respectfully. He also told me to make sure I go in there and shake everybody's hand, ask them, go to them, and make sure you let them know that they're the ones in charge of putting the match together. Even though they're in charge of putting the match together, you need to make sure they have to understand that you have to do what you do. And if they could put them in the right places for you, you would appreciate it. So basically giving them the control over the match, because they were there longer than me. They have more experience than me. And that I'm here as kind of this guy that's learning. Even though I was way up here in the mixed martial arts world, in wrestling, I was down here, and I needed to approach it as so, walking into locker rooms, putting matches together, but yet standing firm enough to where I was getting my stuff over, so as that I wasn't turning into just another pro wrestler. And I remember Bret explained all that to me, and even working through some of the things. And I think the greatest thing that ever happened to me was that Vince put me with Vader, my first match. That was the best thing that could have happened with me, because if I would have been in there with Shawn Michaels or Triple H, I would have hurt him. I would have hurt him, because I'd been out of wrestling for so long that I was still trying to be me, the striking, the knees, kicks, takedowns, submissions. And I didn't have a gauge of what it was like to look real, to make it look like I was literally doing what I was doing. So when I went in with Vader told me, go, brother, just make sure, let's put a good match on together. We'll work it out as we go, but just make sure that you bring it in there, because the last thing you want to do is for people to say you ain't who you are.
So speaking of fights, let's talk about 1997. In your house, cold day in hell. You're in there with the late, great Big Van Vader. As a reminder, Vader had just been arrested in Kuwait for roughing up a news anchor. And it's been written in the newsletters over the years that this may have been punishment for Vader. Let's put him in there with Ken Shamrock. And supposedly he even starts yelling, "Ease up." What do you remember about that match with Vader?
That never happened. At least I didn't hear him. I think Vince did that because he thought that would be a great match. Vader had experience in fighting. He'd done some matches, and that I was, a green kid coming in, even though I had some experience. But no one knew this at the time that I'd done pro wrestling before, because I never told anybody. It was almost like I forgot I'd done it before. Like, here I was in WWF. I was like, okay, I'm here. So I felt like, okay, this was a perfect match for me. I mean, and I'm sure that's why Vince did it. I think Vince thought that this would be a great first match for me.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.